I've been fascinated with the Amish since I was a kid. Here in Pennsylvania, they are ubiquitous. I always had respect for their conviction in not succumbing to the debauchery of modern life. My encounters have been few and far between, but they are well thought of, and locals seek them out for well-made furniture, construction projects, and of course their meats, vegetables, and baked goods. In fact, I still make a weekly trip up to one of their farmers markets to stock up on all the essentials. One of my rural friends owns a farm alongside an Amish community, and they've become quite friendly. So I decided to pick his brain about them. He said they are especially fair to deal with in business as well as socially. They help him out on the farm, and he provides them transportation quite often, happily. He considers them friends. What struck me as odd was when this fellow brother in Christ mentioned that they don't discuss religion with him. Several other friends have also mentioned the same when dealing with them on various construction projects. For some reason, that topic is off limits. It could be that particular order in and around southeastern Pennsylvania, Lancaster to Philly, but I'm not sure. So I decided to do some research into their belief systems. We are dealing with a people who have, as much as possible, closed themselves off from the evils of this world. A fantastic example of John 17:14-17, where Jesus instructs his followers to be in this world but not of it. They follow the words of Christ as much as possible. They don't modify them to honor Satan like we do. Here are some examples. 1. They refuse violence. So obviously government whenever possible, especially military service. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells us to turn the other cheek, and they adhere to that noble gesture completely. They don't even believe in self-defense. To give you an idea just how non-violent they are, take a look at the West Nickel Mines school shooting, also known as the Amish Schoolhouse Massacre. In 2006, just outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in a one-room schoolhouse, a shooter killed 6 little girls in cold blood. I won't go into specifics because the details are quite disturbing, but just know that it was an absolutely horrific crime. What makes this interesting is the community's response to the murders. A grandfather of one of the girls killed in the attack instructed everyone to forgive this man on the actual day it happened. The father of one of the victims tried to calm everyone down to pray for the shooter's soul. The community then reached out to the family of the killer to comfort them. 30 members of that Amish community, including family of the victims, attended his funeral. This is a level of love that cannot even be comprehended by modern society and tells you quite a lot about who they are spiritually. 2. They work with their hands and provide goods and services for the benefit of humanity, just as God intended and quite unlike our own modern society. They have mastered this sentiment. 3. They do not take the adoption of new technology lightly. I'm not really sure why. The New Testament doesn't focus much on technology, other than Jesus instructing us to be in this world but not of it, as mentioned earlier, or John 2:15, where he instructs us not to love the things in this world. But that could apply to nature as well. I couldn't find any specific text that addressed the rejection of human invention, so it could just be part of their Ordnung. Or it could be they got it from Enoch, where wicked technologies introduced to the Nephilim from the fallen angels had destroyed the world. Maybe it's all of the above. Either way, they were correct. TV, internet, modern industry have led multiple generations away from Christ. 4. They also do not dress to impress or brag about their success, nor do they exhibit even the slightest hint of vain or prideful behavior. They wear plain clothes and no makeup. The New Testament is quite clear on this topic, as is Enoch, so no doubt as to why they don't have to think twice about it. The question is, why do we, people who identify as Christians, do it? In John 2:16 and 17, Jesus instructs us not to succumb to the pride of life. Romans 1:21 tells us to avoid vanity or empty self-centered thinking that replaces reverence for God. James 4:16 tells us that boasting and self-glorification, also forms of vanity, are very sinful. And Matthew 6:1 and 2 tells us to avoid righteous acts for vanity or public praise. These are all behaviors vacant from Amish communities. 5. They work together to improve the lives of their entire group. They don't compete with each other, as we have been brainwashed to believe is healthy and normal. If someone gets sick, the entire community chips in to pay for their health care, a far cry from our own social norms. They also ensure every member of their flock is well fed and has a home, and the entire community contributes to its construction. All the while, our own society struggles with the largest housing crisis in human history, all for the sake of greed. Okay, here's where we get into it. Since the churches don't have websites, I checked out the local Mennonite congregations in my area. They are also Anabaptist, amillennialist, but broke from the Amish around 1700 and were much more accepting of modern society, or the English as they call us. They still hold similar beliefs, but since they aren't closed off, embrace technology and actually worship in churches, I can at least find their statement of faith online. That's not to say the Mennonites are the same as the rest of us. They certainly hold the teachings of Christ closer than the modern world. You typically won't see them wearing fancy clothes, and everyday sins for us, like divorce, are not tolerated. Shunning is very real. What I was able to discover was that they both embrace the Dordrecht Confession of Faith. It's a short read, and I recommend everyone take the time to become familiar with it. It won't be foreign to any studied Christian. There's nothing shocking. They just take the teachings of Christ much more seriously than the rest of us. It's clear they embrace the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, which is where they arrived at their stance on nonviolence, avoiding excess, vanity, and pride, among other things. What's interesting is that the Dordrecht Confession of Faith asks believers to proselytize. It states that they must confess his name before men, a clear description of public witness. This language echoes Matthew 10:32 and Romans 10:9, which are core evangelical texts. In fact, if the original Anabaptists were like the Amish of today, their own founder, Jacob Ammon, would have never converted to Christianity because he would have never have heard the words of Jesus Christ. So why would they not just ignore, but deliberately reject this part of their own faith? The Amish haven't completely rejected technology. In fact, in recent years, they've even begun to embrace cell phones, combustion engines, and electricity for work. But they don't allow it to pollute their homes. They use the necessary tools to provide for their families, as noted in 1 Timothy 5:8. But that's where it stops. For all other practical purposes, the Amish are exactly as they have been for hundreds of years. But where it gets interesting is that buggies, plows, hand tools, and even the clothes on their backs are technology, human inventions. So it's not that they reject technology, it's just that they picked a very specific period of time in which they stopped accepting new advancements. And that period of time just happens to coincide with what many of us believe to be the loosing of Satan. They could have chosen any period of time to start rejecting technology, but it looks like right around 1800, with the textiles, the steel plow, the cotton gin, etc. For such a spiritually obedient culture, the only reason I can think of for them to suddenly stop adopting new technology would be because they knew that Satan had taken control of the world. Why are the Amish closed off, hard to discuss views with if Christ repeatedly pleaded with us to spread the word? And even their own statement of faith demands it. Why did they choose a date almost 250 years ago to stop embracing new technology? It would seem like a completely random date if not for what we know today. They don't even have churches like the Mennonites. They congregate in each other's homes to worship, just as Romans 16:5 tells us to do when Christian churches become synagogues of Satan, as most have today. I think they actually know it's the little season because they behave as the Bible tells us to during this time. It makes sense knowing both their text and behaviors that they know what time this is, and they exemplify the perfect example by which we all should live. The question is, why aren't we following suit? God bless everyone.